Greetings, viewer. Welcome to Caritas Focus. My name is Flavia Kunihira. With me in studio, I have the Assistant Humanitarian and Emergency Response Coordinator, Caritas Uganda, Mr. Adong David, with whom we're going to discuss the humanitarian principles and values that Caritas Uganda bases its work in the field in transforming the lives of the community. You're most welcome, Mr. Adong.
Thank you so much, Kunihira, for hosting me in this studio. And as you've said it, my name is David Adong, Assistant Humanitarian Emergency Coordinator, Caritas Uganda.
First and foremost, kindly provide us an overview of Caritas Uganda and its mission in the humanitarian field.
Yeah, thank you. Caritas Uganda is a social development arm of the Catholic Church. And we in Caritas are implementing humanitarian emergency response, which is premised on the principles derived from core humanitarian standards and also the Caritas Internationalis values. So Caritas Uganda stands with a mission of enabling the people to lead life to its fullness. And that is what we stand for. And that is got in the biblical teaching in the Bible in John 10:10.
To our viewer out there, someone would want to understand what exactly is humanitarian work.
Yes, thank you, Flavia. Humanitarian work is actually derived from the crisis that is befalling the world, Africa in particular, and we can talk about Uganda and the neighborhood. In oftentimes, we've realized that due to conflicts, people have migrated, people have been displaced, property has been destroyed, and some people have been left lifeless. So that now calls for a response to save life, to save property, and also sustain human dignity. And that is the reason as why, as Caritas Uganda, we very much respond to people in crisis. For example, our neighborhood was confronted by a political crisis, and that is South Sudan and also Congo. So that forced the people to run, seeking for refuge in Uganda, and Uganda as a country has given homage to those refugees and operating on the open door policy, where those people have been given land to put up their structures, at least cultivate some food, and try to sustain a living. And that is what informs our intervention in as far as humanitarian emergency response is concerned.
Very much, David. What are some of the specific values and principles Caritas Uganda bases on to execute its work in the humanitarian field? And this would be better if you give us some vivid examples.
Yeah. Caritas Uganda is not operating in isolation. We value partnership. And it's on that regard that we derive our principles of operation from the international principles and values. Earlier on, I talked about the core humanitarian principles and then the Caritas Internationalis management standards. And in our operation, we have valued the principle of humanity, the principle of neutrality, the principle of independence, and the principle of impartiality. Let me elucidate that a little. As a Catholic Church, we have the Catholic social teaching, which drives us to appreciating human dignity. And in every operation that we undertake, we value humanity first. We value humanity first, and in every operation, we ensure that whatever support that we give should be able to uphold the dignity of a human person. And that is where we actually, underpin that principle of humanity. And then as an organization that is operating under the Catholic Church, we are supposed to be very impartial. We are not supposed to take sides. in our operations. Say, for example, when there is a crisis in between the government and, say, the rebel group, we are supposed to give our response, our support to all without taking any side. And that is what underpins our work. And then the aspect of neutrality, we are supposed to be neutral. We're not supposed to take sides, because in our operation, we are going to encounter instances where, people in government have been victims of the war. People who are fighting government have been victims of the war, and you find that we must be able to give support without any discrimination. And I give an example of the earlier time during the Konyi incursion, Konyi rebel incursion, where Caritas exhibited the highest level of neutrality. And you find that government and the rebels thought the most impartial organization that would give response was actually Caritas, Caritas Uganda. And we exhibited it with the highest level of integrity and dignity. And then the independence, we must be very independent, not to be influenced, not to execute influenced decisions. We must be able to undertake our own independent decisions that inform the dignity of the human person, because our aspiration is to ensure that the human person sustains life of dignity and enjoys it to the fullest.
Thank you very much, David. Um, our next question is going to be on what distinguishes Caritas Uganda in its operations as opposed to other organizations when it comes to the humanitarian field.
Yeah, as I earlier on indicated, that Caritas Uganda is operating as the social development arm of the Catholic Church. First of all, we value human dignity, we value care of God's creation, we value aspects of exhibiting our work with the highest level of transparency and accountability. And that is the reason as to why you realize that in our operations, we are very much involving. We involve the people in our planning process so that they are able to track from the planning process, implementation process, monitoring process, and evaluation process. And that drives us into the aspect of quantity and quality. We value quality, and everything that goes to the people should be informed by the decisions of the people, but by the priority needs of the people. We don't sit on table to doctor our plans. We involve and we value participation. And I think that is what draws a line of difference in between the operations of Caritas Uganda and the operations of other organizations. And then Caritas Uganda has a wider operation scope informed by our diocesan structure of the Catholic Church. So we uphold the principle of subsidiarity. Any support that we get from our donor agencies, our friends, we channel it down to diocesan Caritases, which are located in the 19 dioceses of the Catholic Church. So you find that the difference is that we are in touch with the people. We are informed by all the needs that we get from the people. And that is what draws the line of difference in between our operations and the operations of probably other agencies. And then, of course, we also value partnership very well. We bring on board our donor agencies, share information that we get from the people. We bring on board people. We bring on board local government, central government in our engagement, and that informs our intervention.
Building on the aspect of humanity, what are those initiatives that Caritas Uganda has exercised the principle of humanity in its work?
Yeah, thank you so much. The principle of humanity in our operations is underpinned by our response in charity, We value addressing the plight that is affecting the people. We know for sure that a majority of people in Uganda, if we are to go by the percentage, about 70% of the people in Uganda are living below $1 a day. And how best can we sustain their living? Our interventions inform that. We look at building their capacity. We look at giving charity for those who are unable to. And then we also value sustainability. So what we drive is to create an enabling environment where our beneficiaries, the vulnerable people, are able to sustain their own lives with dignity. We actually look at one thing, that supporting a person with a fishing net and skilling that person is better than giving that person, fish. So what we have been able to do is we have been able to create an environment by training people. We have put them in groups, we have trained them, we have given them startup kits, which have enabled them to realize their own incomes, which have also enabled them to produce their own food. And therefore, that has built on their sustainability and also built on their human dignity and sustainability. That is cardinal in our operations.
Thank you very much, David. You have talked of some of those initiatives in terms of helping the vulnerable people. Could you please explain to our viewers in what areas of the country are some of these interventions taking place, and what partners are you collaborating with to ensure that these initiatives are making a transformative action in the lives of the community?
Yeah, thank you so much. Caritas Uganda is operating in the country as a whole. In as far as development programs are concerned, and humanitarian emergency response is the one that is specific to the areas that have been that are giving refuge to refugees. Talking about refugee response interventions, we are operating in the areas of West Nile, and particularly we have programs in Bidibidi refugee settlement. We had programs running in Palorinya refugee settlements. We have partnered with Caritas, Hoima, Caritas Fort Poto, who are operating in Changwali and Ishaka too. And talking about the programs that Caritas is undertaking, we are having programs in livelihood where we are targeting the vulnerable people, encourage them to form groups, build their capacity, give them agricultural inputs, and at least follow up with them. And we've got to realize that our intervention has changed life. Our intervention has enabled farmers in that capacity of refugees and host communities to have food, and also income for their sustainability. So that is cardinal. We also have programs on energy and environment, where we had an assessment in West Nile, particularly in Bidibidi. We got to realize that due to the pressure mounting from the refugees from South Sudan, and coupled with the interests from the host communities, there is a lot of pressure that has been amassed on the natural resources, particularly trees, which has led to indiscriminate cutting of trees. So we came up with an initiative of a coker, that is the solar cooker. We interested our partners in Denmark, and there's a company called Pesito, which came up with that solar cooker. And we have given to, so far, 450 refugees in Bidibidi who are able to use that solar cooker, and that has reduced the indiscriminate cutting of trees and also the effects that come from use of biomass, health related, but also, of course, the dangers associated with the smoke and all that kind of thing. So we have got to realize that women are no longer walking for long distances to look for firewood. At least they are able to cook on time and also generate money from the same, a cooker unit, that is a solar cooker, by charging phones from the neighborhood, and they are able to realize some bit of money from that to, complement on their diet. We also have programs that still under energy and environment, where we've been able to provide energy saving stoves to the beneficiaries, at least to ease pressure on the natural resource base. That is very significant, and we've got to realize that, people are able to embrace sustainable environment. And lastly, we also have a program on peace building and conflict resolution, where we've been able to form committees at the refugee and host community level. And these people have been trained on peace building and conflict resolution aspect. They have been able to undertake that. They have been able to resolve conflicts and reduce instances of people, having effects of conflict, and also referral pathways have been established where they can be able to refer those cases that are beyond their jurisdiction. So that we have been able to do perfectly well.
Africa is known for its strong culture. How has Caritas Uganda delivered humanitarian works in the communities that are culturally sensitive and respectful to the local norms of the people?
Yeah, as I had indicated earlier, that Caritas Uganda is not operating in isolation. And what informs our entry in any community is the local leadership, in our programming. So whenever we're developing any program, we consult the local leadership on the cultural dimensions of that locality, so that we're able to come up with the responses that do not contradict with the cultural, dimensions of such a community. And secondly, we don't come up with our own needs as Caritas Uganda. We involve people at the grassroots level to draw key priorities in as far as the needs are concerned. So we have informed responses that we always give, documented responses coming from the people themselves. So the responses that we give are informed by the needs, and we don't contradict. For example, in West Nile, in Bidibidi refugee settlement, we always involve the local communities to come up with their needs. So we can't sit and, a majority of those people are Muslims. And we can't sit and develop, say, a piggery project, which contradicts with the cultural dimension of that, the religious and cultural dimension of that place. So we are informed by the needs of the people, coming from the people themselves.
Thank you very much, David. To our viewers, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. We are still with the Assistant Humanitarian and Emergency Response Coordinator of Caritas Uganda, Mr. Adong David, discussing the humanitarian principles that guide Caritas in implementing its work. Accountability is one of the values of humanitarian work. How does Caritas Uganda account to its stakeholders, adhering to the principles in implementing?
Yeah, thank you so much, viewers out there. It's very important to note that we are operating based on the existing principles. And the aspect of accountability, you realize that Caritas Uganda is operating and embracing at the same time the aspect of complaint and feedback mechanism. We have established a fully fledged desk with unemployed staff handling that, the aspect of accountability, and people have been made aware of the complaint and feedback mechanism process. Communities, beneficiaries have been trained, have been sensitized, and then we have also trained our volunteers on feedback and complaint mechanism process. So our beneficiaries are allowed to complain. And the complaints are looked at within, a specific period of time, and feedback is given accordingly. So in that process, the beneficiaries are able to hold us accountable. Say, for example, in our operations, in the conduct of our staff, and probably in anything that is related to our intervention. So that enables us to know and also inform our programming in as far as that is concerned. And then two, we hold what we call inception meetings. And in those inception meetings, we always inform the beneficiaries on the programs that Caritas has come up with. At that point in time, they're able to be informed on all the nitty-gritties of the program, and they're able to keep tracking it. At the time of implementation, at the time of monitoring, we bring on board the leadership, the local leadership, at the community level and also at the refugee level, most especially the refugee welfare chairpersons, and then the local government. We bring them on board to monitor our interventions, and that gives a basis and a platform for aspect of accountability and registration of any complaint. And then, we also, at the time of development, we consult. At the time of development of our plans, we consult the people themselves to give us their priority needs. So it is that documentation process, implementation process, monitoring that gives a basis for how best we relate with our beneficiaries in as far as accountability and transparency is concerned. And then additionally, we have built partnership with the Office of the Prime Minister, UNHCR, and we bring on board those actors in the process of our implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. And we are able to appreciate that fact of accountability in our operations and transparency.
Thank you very much, David. Uganda is known for hosting the largest number of refugees in Africa. What is the selection criteria that is used in selecting, or let's say, hosting the people that are fleeing from other countries into Uganda?
Yeah, in Uganda, our operations are coordinated by the Office of the Prime Minister and with UNHCR. So the aspect of registration of refugees who are fleeing from other countries is the mantle that is taken by the Office of the Prime Minister and UNHCR. And for us, in our selection criteria, we only value the refugees who have the registration cards at the settlement level. That informs our selection of such a refugee, because without the registration card, we assume that maybe you're not a refugee. There are instances where host communities have been seen, pretending to be refugees so as to tap into benefit or to get into the program. So it is cardinal that for us we look at the registration details of the refugees. But of course, that does not mean we don't support the host communities, because initially our operations were informed by the REHOP strategy, that is refugee host community population. So that was informed by REHOP, whereby we were selecting 70% of the refugees for any of our interventions, and then 30% host communities to benefit from our interventions. But of course, now there's a lot of debate on the rehope, and I think it has been put on hold. At a certain time, there was a discussion of 50-50 benefit. Host communities would benefit 50%, and then the refugees also benefit 50%. I think a conclusive decision has not yet been taken on that regard, but any decision that will be taken shall inform our intervention. But then I should be able to interest the viewers on our selection criteria. In our programming, we look at the vulnerability aspect, because what we target is to benefit the poor of the poorest. So we look at the aspect of the very, very vulnerable people. And then the other is the capability. Are you capable? Are you able to undertake the program or the project that we have designed? For example, if it is goat keeping, we look at what we call the legs, that is livestock emergency guidelines, to determine whether an individual can benefit from that project or not. For example, if it is a person with a physical impairment, you cannot give a goat or a bull, for that matter, to that person, because that person will not be able to take, to sustainably keep that cow or bull. So we have to critically look at that aspect when we're developing, and also identifying the beneficiaries who are to benefit from this. And then the aspect of location. We cannot select somebody, say, who is from a different location when we have a project that is meant for the people of West Nile, the people of Bidibidi refugee settlement. And then we are going to bring on board a person from, say, Changwali. It does not make sense. So we put that as our selection criteria, and that should inform the kind of beneficiaries that we actually select. And to achieve that, we have oftentimes involved the local leadership in the selection and confirmation of those beneficiaries.
What are some of the challenges Caritas Uganda has encountered in the humanitarian field during its implementation of the work, while staying true to its principles?
Some of the challenges that we have always encountered, like any other place, is an overwhelming number of refugees, an overwhelming number of host communities. Because, say, for example, we have youth programs that are geared towards skilling the youth. We have quite a number of youth who are unemployed, who would have deserved to be skilled so that they're able to sustain their livelihood. But then, due to limited resources that we are unable to reach out to that overwhelming number. And then it's also critical to note that we have a challenge from climate change. We have been able to build the capacity of our farmers, that is, of course, the refugees and host communities, in agricultural best practices. But the implementation of those best practices has been curtailed by the effects of climate change. So you find that the aspect of timeliness in the production process, agricultural production, productivity, post-harvest handling, has been curtailed by the effects of climate change. Of course, we have tried to address it, by giving fast-growing seeds, and also tapping into the information from meteorological authority and disseminating it to the farmers. But that alone has not really helped a great deal, because still, even at the time such information is given, sometimes it comes late, and then sometimes it does not consonate with the real, what comes after. Sometimes they forecast there are going to be rains. You give that information. Then, on the contrary, rains don't come. You see? So those are the challenges that we've been able to encounter. And then at the refugee settlement level, you realize that there is a challenge of land. The refugees do not have the land, so we're forced to engage with the office of the Prime Minister and the landlords, at least to give some pieces of land to the refugees so that they are able to undertake agricultural practices and come up with some bit of food that can complement the food that they get from World Food Program. But then there is still a challenge that the number of beneficiaries that we've been able to identify cannot all get the land. Cannot get the land. So it's a challenge that we are confronted with. And the other is dishonesty from the landlords. They give the refugees the land, wait for the refugee to cultivate that land, put his crops. At the time when the crops are almost maturing, they come claiming for the land, and they won't take the land, take also the crops that the refugees have grown. So it's been challenging. We have made effort to come up with the peace committees so as to, dialogue, help the refugees to dialogue. And also we have made referrals to the Office of the Prime Minister, and also some cases that have led to violence. We have been able to refer them to police because they are beyond our jurisdiction. But then those are the kind of challenges that we are faced with from day to day in our operations. But cardinal is the limited resources. If we would only widen our resource base, we would be able to reach out to the overwhelming number of the vulnerable people out there.
Thank you very much, David. Sustainability is a very important aspect of any initiatives carried out. How does Caritas Uganda put in place the aspect of sustainability while maintaining the principles and values of humanitarian work?
As Caritas Uganda, we are critical in thinking. We know for sure that at a certain time, Caritas can withdraw probably. Caritas can withdraw, we may not be having resources, and how best can our beneficiaries be able to sustain the running projects. So we have gone into scaling, and whenever we're developing the project, we look at the aspect of sustainability. So we've built a capacity of quite a number of youth in carpentry and joinery, in tailoring and all that, and we've been able to give startup kits to them. So even with or without Caritas Uganda, they're able to sustain their livelihood, they're able to generate their own monies and complement with any effort that is made outside that. And then two, we have also been able to form community structures. I talked about the peace committees at the community level that have been trained on peace building and conflict resolution. With or without Caritas, they're able to engage in communities where there is a conflict. They are given information, and they're able to engage in as far as conflict resolution is concerned. And that is cardinal in our work, because conflicts are a day-to-day, there are things that happen in a day-to-day life. So how best can we be able to sustain that? We have done that. And we have also been able to build the capacities of our farmers in as far as sustainable agriculture is concerned. And that, when I was growing up, I got to realize that knowledge is wealth, and we've been able to realize this in our areas of operation. We've built capacities. Farmers have been able to exhibit the best practices of that, and we've also been able to establish the market process so that after their productivity, they're able to identify, market for their products, sell them. Linkages have been established, and that is very, very, very cardinal. And then two, we have been able to undertake partnership with the local governments in our areas of operation. For example, in Bidibidi, we've been able to undertake partnership with the local government of Yumbe, while in Fort Portal, in Hoima, Caritas Fort Portal, Caritas Hoima have been able to build partnership with those local governments, so that even after Caritas interventions or Caritas tomorrow withdraws, the local government takes over, because it's important to note that we only complement the role of government. So bringing government on board is very, very important in as far as sustainability is concerned. And then in my earlier submission, we always don't forget the local leadership. We bring on board the local leadership in every intervention that we go with to the community. At the level of entry, at the level of exit, we bring on board the local leadership. And by so doing, that gives them information, that gives them power, aspect of holding us accountable, and also sustaining the project even after Caritas has exited.
Within Uganda, we have faced a number of emergencies and crises. How has Caritas Uganda been able to respond swiftly and effectively to these emergencies while maintaining the humanitarian principles?
Yes. Caritas Uganda's intervention is premised on the core humanitarian standards, which dictates, one, the swiftness of our response, timeliness of our response. And it's on that regard that in every crisis that happens, say in the country, we always consider the timeliness of our response. And then the relevance of our response. Is it of any relevance? You know, we cannot come up with any response, any intervention that is not relevant to the community. So we must be able to value that cardinally. And then the other is, does it build the capacity of those communities? That is what informs our response. We develop it in a way that our response leaves behind capacity building for any community, for those communities. And that takes into consideration the aspect that we discussed earlier, the aspect of sustainability. After Caritas has exited, that community is able to continue with that engagement that we went with. And then the other is also what we discussed already, the aspect of accountability and feedback. We always involve communities in identification of needs, identification of priority needs, challenges, and all that kind of thing. And then we are able to come up with a risk matrix together. We come up with measures of probably reducing the likely risks, you know. And at the end of it all, community's involvement has been taken into consideration. And then feedback given accordingly. At the time of intervention, we give feedback to them, you know, on any complaints that come about, on any issues that probably were raised earlier. We give feedback accordingly. That is cardinal. We take into that. And then, of course, the aspect of communities being free to complain, you know, that has been ascribed clearly in the core humanitarian standards that guides our operations. So we make sure that in every intervention, in every response that we develop, all those aspects are factored in and guides us accordingly. And interestingly, Caritas Uganda is also operating based on the Caritas Internationalis management standards. So we look at the conduct of our staff. Are they sexually exploiting beneficiaries? Are they sexually harassing? When that happens, of course, the other principle of complaint mechanism comes in. The capacity that the communities have been built on, in as far as that is concerned, comes in. They're able to report to us. But we build the capacity of our staff in that regard, on safeguarding, on exploitation, harassment, and then the aspect of power. So you find that, you realize that countrywide, we appreciate the conduct of our staff in as far as implementation is concerned, because we have been able to build their capacity in any response. So that is how we relate with the principles that have already been instituted. And of course, locally, we also have the rules and regulations of Uganda Episcopal Conference that also guide our operations. So the shiftiness, the relevance, the timeliness, all that transparency and accountability is taken into consideration in all our operations, which we find very cardinal and unique in our operations.
Thank you very much, David. Building on that, we have talked of timeliness, swiftness, and effectiveness. Could you please give us a scenario where Caritas has affected the swiftness, the effectiveness, and the timeliness? For example, we had a situation whereby there was lack of food in Moroto. How did Caritas Uganda respond to this emergency?
Thank you so much. When we talk about Caritas Uganda, we are talking about Caritas organizations in Uganda. And indeed, we realized that there was famine in Moroto. And very fast, Caritas Fort Portal was able to give, I only forget the tons of food that were delivered, not in Moroto, but it was in Kotido. It was actually in Kotido. That defines the shiftness that we have, even against the background that we have limited resources. But we always try to be shift. We are helped by the local resource mobilization. We have the Palm Sunday collection, where people are able to, at least dioceses are able to collect some money for such emergency responses. We also have them in kind. We in oftentimes we've been able to deliver, say, clothes, actually food and non-food items. So we've been able to deliver them to, for example, in Bududa. We've been able to do that. But also, interestingly, we were able to build partnership with CRS, and we timely responded to the landslides in Bududa. I think that has been key in our operations.
Thank you very much, David, for joining us on the show and sharing this very important knowledge concerning the humanitarian principles and values that Caritas Uganda bases on in implementing its work. My name is Flavia Kunihira. I have been your host. Thank you for watching UCTV Television and follow us on all our online platforms. Until next time.